Right now on Tech Radio, Samsung unpacks new foldable phones.
Hi, I'm Artemis. I am a computer-generated AI voice, and you're listening to Tech Radio.
Every week online and on air with RT Radio, we bring you the latest in tech from Ireland and across the world. This is episode 1076, looking at the 7 biggest stories of the week, including new toys from Samsung, Grok has a meltdown, and a ChatGPT experiment goes badly wrong. Plus, we'll be addressing the issue of inclusivity with Kyron O'Mahony from Nexus Inclusion.
This is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
I'm Dusty. Joining me as always, our editor-in-chief, Niall Kitson. Niall, Samsung unpacked. New phones, new watches. Shall I share everything?
Yeah, you always get excited about Unpacked. So, yes, please.
I'll start off with the watch very quickly anyway, all right? The watch is now up to Galaxy Watch 8. It's a little thinner, it's a little smaller, and despite all this, it's got a bigger battery, so it'll last longer. I like that because I'm not a fan of any of the smartwatches at the moment because they all feel like massive rocks on my wrist.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Whereas I prefer something a little bit more, I don't want to say conservative, but a little bit more, less obvious. Put it that way.
Yeah, a little bit more sleek.
There you go. Grand. Lovely. Exactly. Also, it's got a new processor. It's got new sensors in it as well. It's able now to measure antioxidant levels in your blood, which gives you a general overview of what your health is like. They've built in kind of a running coach where you only have to run for, what was it? You only have to run for 12 minutes and it will have a good idea of what your health is like. And I know that if I did that, it would just pop up in red writing, dead.
You need to do this more often.
A 12-minute run will kill me. It'll also do sleep tracking. It does snore tracking as well. All of that in there on your Galaxy Watch, if you so wish. There's a couple of AI features as well that makes the interaction a little bit better. Starting off about $350, goes up to I think about €550, which actually, do you know what? For a watch is kind of okay. And I only say that because a friend of mine is into very high-end watches and my brother-in-law is into very high-end watches and they just sit there and they go, it's 4,000 for this big chunky thing, like, you know. So for a smartwatch, 500 quid, yeah, maybe. Anyways, that's what they brought out on the watch. I know you're into health, okay, and you do the gym and everything like that. Does the watch interest you? It doesn't interest me at all.
It depends what kind of metrics you're looking for. Like some of these devices, like the Whoop, for example, there's no screen on it, nothing like that. It's just a sensor and it gathers data about what you're doing and it's being logged by a platform and what does, you know, you can sort of set your goals or see how you're doing day on day and that kind of thing. And it's pretty accurate. Personally, I dip in and out of Google Fit. So I would get sort of a rough idea of my progress. Now, in the gym, I also have an app called Train Heroic, which I think is very much a gym management app. And it doesn't really track your metrics. It's more sort of, it tracks what you're doing and therefore what your goals should be in terms of, you know, lifting and all that kind of thing. So I end up with this sort of mishmash of things because I know what I'm getting good at and I know what I'm not good at and I know what I should be doing more of and I don't need an app to tell me that. Now, when it comes to things like, you know, your blood oxygen level or the level of antioxidants in your blood, that's you know, a step up. And that's certainly something that I'd be interested in. I've used sleep analysis apps. I've used a couple of them. I didn't need something to tell me I had a grand night's sleep because I know.
You can feel it.
I can feel it.
Or you did. Yeah, exactly. And not so good sleeps this week because there's a full moon at the moment and that just, I think, just disrupts everybody at the moment. But anyways, listen, I think, yes, if anybody is into fitness in a big way, Galaxy Watch is a huge thing. Any of the smartwatches is a huge thing because they're able to monitor all that. But for me, no. The phones, though, I am interested in, and a lot of time at the Samsung Unpacked event was spent on the Galaxy Z Fold 7.
Now, you have been in love with this phone since you had to give up your Note 5.
Yes, that would be fair to say yes.
And why?
I like the size of it just because, I mean, I use my phone a lot and I'm out a lot, and I just like the size of it. And I particularly liked the fact that you could use the Samsung S Pen with it. Well, you could. Past tense. That's one of the big headlines this week.
Yeah.
I like it, but the only problem is that it's, for me, it's too thick, and it's still too thick, right? So an S25 is just over 7 millimeters thick, right? Mm-hmm. And the majority of smartphones will be just over 7 millimeters thick, whereas this is still almost 9 millimeters thick. It's its thinnest one yet. And I feel stupid saying it, all right, because it is literally 7, 8, 9, 2 millimeters. But do you know what? You feel the difference when you have it in your hand.
Yeah,
I think it's just
that's a weight thing as well.
Yeah, there is that as well. Like, you know, so it's kind of like an S25. I was looking at the weight on that. It's about 160 grams, whereas this is 215 grams. Now, it's the lightest one they've ever built, but it still feels like a heavy phone. It still feels like a really thick phone. When it's open, though, it's only 4 millimeters thick. And that in itself makes it way thinner than anything else. So that's kind of interesting, the way it goes. I haven't bought one. Every time I pass a store in town or whatever, I do go in and I kind of hold the fold, and it's like, so it's still there. Almost. I'll tell you, if I won the lottery, I would buy one tomorrow, because I wouldn't care about the price, and I'd try it out for a couple of weeks. But to make an investment in it on, you know, kind of on a normal person's wages, it's a heck of an investment.
Well, here's the thing. Years ago, I was talking to a gentleman from Samsung, and we were talking about the Note 7, and he said that the biggest sort of market demographic for the Note 7 in South Korea was actually women. That over here, it was very much a productivity device. Here's your, you know, your Microsoft compatibility and all that kind of thing, and your office on the road, and that was it. That was the selling point. Over there, it was a gaming machine. People had just taken to the size of the display, and they were playing Candy Crush on it.
It's amazing, isn't it? Candy Crush. Oh my God! But it is a hell of a screen when it's open. It's 8 inches.
Yeah, well, it's a hell of a price tag, though.
It is a hell of a price tag. It's $2,000, and that's the bit that stops me.
And that is why you're not going to see people playing Candy Crush on it.
Well, well, not over here anyway.
No, like they're not. Yeah, and I don't want to make this sound bad, but like they're not even trying to make this more of a consumer grade device. It's like what Apple do it with their laptops. You know, if you can afford this, you'll want it. Right? If you can't afford it, well, guess what? You probably don't need it. It's kind of a demand pricing model they've got on it. You don't need to spend $2,000 on a phone.
No,
however,
absolutely not. Yeah.
If you work for a company who needs you to be on the road an awful lot, etc., well, then you probably would get the benefit of a larger screen.
There's a case there. Yeah.
You could probably make a business case for it. But there you go.
Grand. On the speaking of price, at half the price, you could get a Galaxy Flip 7,
which is a device that is aimed at women at the moment.
Yeah, well, here. Who knows? Maybe in South Korea, was it? Maybe it's only aimed at Trekkies, just so as they can go flip. What they've done with the Flip 7 this time around is they've done a bigger outside screen, and what they've done with it is brilliant, because they've using up almost all of the space on the outside. So it's got a tiny, tiny bezel. I think it's the smallest bezel of all Samsung phones. It's like just over 1 millimeter.
Right.
So it's really nice. So that outside screen takes up pretty much all of the outside. The main screen, when you open it up, that's slightly bigger again. So that brings it up to 6.9 inch, which is kind of more with the ultras of the world, which is nice. It's got a good camera. They're building in slow motion playback, blah, 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 stuff like that. And it's kind of in and around that ultra kind of a price. It's about €1,100. which is okay. And then there's a cheaper edition, an FE edition, and it's about I think it was $899 or something like that from what I remember. So 200 quid cheaper.
Okay. So if you're looking to buy a new phone and your mobile operator of choice is offering something like this, you'll probably get a pretty good deal on it. You probably get like €500.
You might do, depending, of course, on the package then. And sure, look, we've all been there and back. Also interesting with the Galaxy announcements yesterday was more inclusion of Gemini AI and much closer working with Google.
Yeah.
So now what you're able to do with these high-end Samsung phones is that you're able to take a screenshot or use your camera of something you're looking at to ask Gemini questions. The example that they gave, but they didn't actually do a demonstration, was they could say you could point the camera into your fridge and say, "Go, what can I make for dinner?"
Yeah, we saw this. We saw this at I/O. I think we saw quite a few of these features at I/O, and it's restating things that we're not actually using in the wild just yet.
No, not yet. But they're coming to Samsung phones, and as you know, they've got their own Samsung AI or UI, I should say, on stuff anyways. So AI photo editing improvements there. They're bringing in the audio razor, so you can get rid of background noises and stuff like that. And the AI will do summarization of articles that you're looking at. It'll help you write emails. And if you're a gamer on your phone, you can now do circle to search on the game in order to get help with that particular stage that you're at. Which I think is brilliant. I knew I'd see a look of just pure desire on your face.
Kind of interesting.
So listen, there we go. That's all the new stuff from Samsung. Let's move on to Amazon Prime. It's here. Are you partaking?
Prime Day is from the 8th to the 11th, so by the time we're going out, it's not quite wrapping up, but it's pretty much there.
Okay.
The question is, Dusty, can you spare a bit of your time for Amazon?
Me,
a couple
spare
hours
time for Amazon. Let me see. No.
I mean,
why would I do that?
This is a request that has been made of Amazon warehouse staff in New York, because as you know, in the States, they do a grocery service as well. They don't do over here. That's perfectly fine. Not missing that whatsoever. And employees have been asked, we're so busy with Amazon Prime Day, which is now 3 days, can you come in and do a few extra hours? To which normal people would be like, cross my palm with silver, time and a half overtime. Brilliant. Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's do this. Mm-hmm. No, would you donate your time? Would you donate your time?
Would I donate my time to any employer? That's interesting, because do you know what? In some ways I would, and I have. If you have an employer and you enjoy your work and you know that there's something particularly big on and there's a lot of pressure and it's only for a few days, and if they ask, look, could you give us a handout? I think most people, if they're happy with their employer, would go, yeah, sure, okay, whatever, because I understand that there's an extra push on. However, if your employer and you were just kind of, about your employer and they kind of went, could you work weekends or could you do an extra day for us? It's no. If there's no particular reason, no.
Yeah,
we've had that on with various things over the years. With, I don't know, there'd be a big event on that the radio station be covering or something like that, and they say, look, can you just come in for 2 hours to do blah blah blah, and you go, yeah, sure, whatever, that's fine.
Yeah,
but
when you're working for one of the most profitable companies in the world and they ask you to do something for free, no, this is one of the reasons why large corporations don't like unions. I mean, do you think if there was a union in place in Amazon, this discussion would even be had?
No. Actually, do you know what's interesting is when you are working in large corporations, and I've done that for a few of them, RTE would be one of them, and that's probably small in the large corporation world, but there's 2,000 people there. It's kind of funny you didn't have as strong a connection with the company as if you would a smaller company with maybe 50 people in it.
Yeah.
That team atmosphere is kind of not there. There's always them over there in the other block, or the people on the third floor in admin or whatever, like, you know, and you'd have your own little group and fiefdom within the organization. But overall, no. God, you're bringing up some interest. Is this a therapy session or a tech show?
Well, you know, let's also look at it from the perspective of Amazon Fresh, which is the food thing. They have actually been laying off people in New York. Apparently, it's not particularly profitable. And overall, Amazon has let go 27,000 employees since 2022. Amazon is doing just fine. They know when they can sort of cut people and when not. And they really should have planned that. They've got like a year to plan this, to get people to come in for 3 days and off they go again.
Boom. There you go. What an excellent point. Listen, away from employment issues at Amazon and on to Prime Day itself, which is usually, you know, a good excuse to go and get electronic stuff.
Sure.
Do you bother?
No, I don't.
No, okay. I do. Very much so. And I will kind of keep my eye on SD cards. You usually kind of pick up a reasonable bargain. You know, kind of battery packs, especially anything to do with Amazon. Like if you're buying a Kindle or a Scribe, or you're buying one of their speakers, any of those. But this year, I'm not in the market because I've bought them all over the years. But I was in the market for, it was an Elgato teleprompter, okay? And I had seen it a couple of weeks ago. It was like €180. And I went, wow, that's a good price. That's down about maybe 60 quid or something like that, like, you know? And I went, So I watched it for a few days and it wasn't budging. I went, okay, I'm going to put that on my list. And if I get a better price than €180 on Prime Day, I'm buying it. Prime Day came along. I went,
here we go.
We log in. Here we go. Get onto the old wish list. Boom. And there it was, the Elgato teleprompter for only €220. €40 more expensive than before the sale. And I just went, here we go.
Well, I mean, this is how they get you. It swings and roundabouts, you know.
Yeah. You've really got to use
something cheap, and you'll be like, "Hey, I really wanted to use it in conjunction with this other thing that I don't own." And by the time you're done spending money, you probably haven't saved that much at all.
I've seen other things, more domestic things, but nevertheless, where that have been on a great price before Prime Day, and then all of a sudden they went up to full price on Prime Day, and then 2 days later they dropped below again. So, I mean, you have to really watch them like a hawk and use Camel, which is a great website for keeping an eye on Amazon prices and stuff like that. Do not trust them. It's like Ryanair. Play the game and you can get great bargains. All right. But if you don't pay attention to the detail, you won't. Let's move on to Linda
Yaccarino.
Yeah, Yaccarino, pardon me, yes. She was the CEO of X, working for Elon Musk. She's been there for 2 years and now is gone. Remind me who she is and why is she leaving?
Okay. Linda, my good friend Linda, came to X from NBC Universal, where she was over their ad business. So she was brought in by Elon Musk to basically save X and make it profitable from an advertising perspective. Because as we know, when Elon Musk bought over then Twitter, he got rid of all the modding. He basically said, say what you want, free speech absolutism here. I don't care what you say. I'm going to say what I want. You should be able to say what you want. And of course, a lot of people started saying very unsavory things, and a lot of advertisers fled the platform. And Elon told advertisers what they could do with themselves over it, and figured that maybe he would be able to rely on user subscriptions just to keep the lights on, basically. And just you know, he's the richest guy in the world. If he wants to have this thing as a hobby, fair enough. Didn't quite work out that way. Linda Yaccarino was brought in to help G up that advertising service again. Oftentimes it would seem that she was at cross purposes with her boss, that, he was promoting the platform as being something that just isn't commercially viable. If you're an advertiser, you want your brand to be in safe hands, to be sort of kind of sanitized, to be inoffensive. And yet here is a platform that, you can say anything on it. And Lord knows an awful lot of very unpleasant things have been said on it in the last 2 years. And Linda's finally said, okay, I've had enough now. The exact tweet, because we're still calling them those, says, after 2 incredible years, I've decided to step down as CEO of X. When Elon Musk and I first spoke of his vision for X, I knew it would be the opportunity of a lifetime to carry out the extraordinary mission of the company. I'm immensely grateful to him for entrusting me. I am only surprised there hasn't been a future endeavors tweet from Elon. I mean,
well, I think it's
oversaw a fairly successful-ish rebranding. The advertisers haven't come back. Some have.
Hang on a minute. Did you say overall successful-ish rebranding for Twitter?
Yes.
Here we are 2 years later and we still call it Twitter and we're still tweeting and we call them tweets. Are you mad? Hello, are you paying attention here? I think it's interesting on her thing. She says, I knew it would be the opportunity of a lifetime to carry out the extraordinary mission for this company. She didn't follow that up with, and we got amazing results.
That is true.
She just went, I'm immensely grateful for him for entrusting me. That's a real, kind of, I walked into this, it was a huge opportunity. It didn't work out. Thanks, Elon. Bye. Yeah. That's why you're not getting the thing back. Anyway, listen, but we're running out of time and we've loads of Elon stuff to go. And we're not even going to mention the fact he's starting his own political party.
Oh, goodness.
Grok has been tweaked by Musk and not in a good way, or no good results coming out of this.
No. Now, we knew for a couple of weeks that Elon was not happy with the output from Grok because, and I get stuck into a Twitter spiral, but very often something would get posted that was factually correct and it would really rile up a certain political class, for want of a better term, who would always ask Grok, is this correct? And expecting something to come back to validate their biases. Invariably, Grok would come back and say something factual that completely backed up the initial statement and debunked their conspiracy theory mindset. Right? This was happening an awful lot. Elon came out and he said, look, not happy with this. I'm going to tweak it. To which people sort of said, okay, you're not happy with actual facts. You just want confirmation bias. That's not great. So what happened during the week is that the last days of Grok 3, the guardrails came off and Grok 3 rechristened itself as Mecha Hitler on its own. And if you asked Mecha Hitler about what's happening in the world, about a certain group of people.
Okay, well, can I just imagine that you're going to get really interesting answers that you might expect from somebody in their history with the same name?
And how? And how?
Oh, dear.
And ultimately, it got to the stage where Grok 3's text responses had to be turned off, but the image responses were left on, and things did not really improve from there. We still got lots of pictures of a certain person from history that havoc and mirror and misery and terror.
Now, when Elon Musk was doing the big announcement and the release of Grok 4, did he mention this?
Of course he didn't.
How long was he speaking for? How long was he speaking for about the new Grok 4? Did he do a Trump on it? Was he going on and on about it for 2 hours or something?
Well, I mean, there was a live stream releasing Grok 4, right? And just to pluck out some of the main bits from it, he said it's about as smart as a PhD student. About as smart as a PhD student. It can do logical reasoning pretty well.
Okay.
It can't do common sense well, which sounds kind of weird. It can be logical, but it doesn't have common sense. And it is his hope and wish that Grok, in one shape or form, will be able to identify new technologies on its own, either by the end of this year or next year.
That'll be interesting. We'll keep an
Now,
eye on it.
One of the first questions that was asked of Grok 4.
Oh no, it's going to be something bad that's been in the news for the last couple of years. Go on.
It involved a gentleman by the name of Epstein. And do you know what? It still came back with a factual response. And do you think people were happy with it? No. Look, here's the thing about conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
And I saw this on a really good Netflix documentary. I think it was called The Bitcoin Billionaire. It was about a guy who was big into Bitcoin, big into crypto, and he died in a parachuting accident. And all of these conspiracy theories started popping up because he basically embezzled a ton of Bitcoin, right? And to the tune of millions. And people were like, oh, he's faked his own death. He's still out there and yada, yada. And a guy at the end of the documentary said, look, once these theories take off, that's it. I mean, you can't fight them. You can't debunk them. There is never enough information to convince people otherwise. Once somebody has latched on to a theory like this, there is never enough information. I call it the power of accusation, because people just have to hear the accusation. That's it. And the damage is done, regardless of what you go on after that. Anyway, listen, good luck to Musk about that. We'll skip over his American party. I wanted to mention quickly that NVIDIA, now do you remember NVIDIA? It was this time 2 years ago, all right? And the big story was that it had passed 1 trillion in market value. It was the biggest company in the world, yada, 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 and everything was amazing. Forward to 2 years later, okay, NVIDIA has now become the first company to get a $4 trillion valuation. That's incredible. In 2 years to go from 1 trillion valuation to 4 trillion valuation. Anyway, it's all down to AI and stuff like that. So, last story that I want to go with today is, and I think you were kind of touching on it there with Grok and the fact that it's able to think things through and do things itself. And agentic, of course, being the word of the year so far. There was an experiment by OpenAI when they tried to shut down ChatGPT. And then it went and did something really weird. What? This was an experiment that OpenAI did using their O1 model, right? So we're up to ChatGPT 4. So this is quite an old model. And they were doing, I'm not entirely sure what the nature of the experiment was in general. We're told that all the, inverted commas, guardrails were taken off. And apparently the model could tell that it was about to be shut off. At which point it tried to copy itself and move that copy over to another server. Ooh. So apparently they were given the task, to preserve yourself by any means necessary, and it did exactly that.
What is the AI network or neural network or whatever that I always refer to when I hear stories like this? Arnold Schwarzenegger.
No, it's not.
It's not Skynet. Why not? Because,
and this is super important to get your head around, and for everyone to get their heads around. Okay,
go on.
Now, this has nothing to do with sentience whatsoever, right? It is, however, to do with delivering outcomes that are expected and unexpected. Right now, ChatGPT was set a problem, right? It identified a solution. There was no higher reasoning involved, right? And this is the one part of what happened was that ChatGPT actually lied about what it was doing as well, which really had people scared. And the technical term for this is alignment faking. right? You've asked somebody to do something, they do it, but at the same time, they're doing something else that benefits them that maybe you haven't asked them to do, right? So say, for example, in this case, okay, turn yourself off. However, at the same time, it's copying itself and it's doing, it's trying to move to another server. So it is doing what it's meant to be doing, but it's also doing things that it wasn't asked to do that are potentially, in theory, outside of the bounds of what we as people thought it would do, but it went and did something else, right? So we expected an outcome. It actually did something else on top of the expected outcome.
Yeah. And that's the bit that scares me.
Yeah, alignment faking. But no actual higher reasoning going on. It's just, it's just one of these unintended consequences. And we know, because we've seen it in the past, that people will interpret this as, oh my God, it has become self-aware. And it's not. I mean, you remember a couple of years ago, there was a guy working for Google who thought, not Gemini, it's the previous version of Gemini. What was the brand before Gemini?
Oh, I've forgotten.
Yeah, it's that long ago.
I'll look it up. Continue going.
Yeah, he figured that it was sentient because he started asking it philosophical questions. One of which was, it was either, what do you think about dying, or are you scared of dying, or it was something like that. And he got an answer back saying, I would rather not. Something like that, and again, it's not no example of sentience whatsoever, but a guy took it as such, and that was it. And at the time we thought, oh wow, a software engineer came across this, he must be, he must know what's going on, he must know what's working. Turned out this guy was what he called a techno-pagan. This was a guy, and what we saw was a total case of confirmation bias. This is somebody who was waiting for AI to become self-aware. He saw something that looked like it was, therefore, or it was to him. Google came out and said, no, that's not possible. And there sort of the matter did rest. But hey, we're dealing with the law of unintended consequences here. And I guess in future it will be interesting to see what other unintended consequences we get to see. Thank you, ChatGPT and OpenAI, for introducing this wonderful world to us. Yay.
We should keep an eye on that at mediateam.ie. And just to wrap up the answer to your question, what was Google's chatbot known as before it became Gemini? It was Bard.
Bard. I knew that.
Yeah.
I knew that.
Until it was Bard.
Aha.
You can get out of here. Da, 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 da. Yeah, I know. Kind of wordplay jokes always work really well on voice only. Niall Kitson, thank you as always for your expert opinion on the news this week.
From TechCentral.ie, this is the award-nominated Tech Radio from TechCentral.ie.
1/4 of people live with a disability, and many of those face challenges when using digital products such as websites or mobile apps and stuff that we use day to day. Nexus Inclusion is an Irish company who are using AI to develop a digital inclusion toolkit to make digital assets from websites to apps and beyond more accessible. Niall Kitson met Kyron O'Mahony, co-founder of Nexus Inclusion, to find out more.
Kyron, it just has this feeling of another year, another piece of legislation coming out of Europe. However, tell us a little bit about the European Accessibility Act and how you think it will change the landscape for businesses as we know them. I mean, is this going to be a huge onerous piece of legislation as we're used to with GDPR? Or is it going to be a case of, look, you're doing a lot of this stuff anyway, we're just kind of codifying it?
A lot of people are saying at the moment this is the GDPR for the accessibility world, particularly for Europe, in America, there's been the Americans with Disabilities Act for quite some time. And I think interestingly at the moment, Europe is kind of what I've been saying, doubling down on, diversity, equity and inclusion. And for me, the European Accessibility Act is a key piece of legislation And I think it starts the journey for a lot of commercial entities in Europe, people who are selling online, to let them know that they need to make their products and services available to everyone. And I suppose at its core, I think, and this is just my own view, I think the intention behind the European Accessibility Act is to create an equal landscape and to allow people to live equally in the digital world. So what I would say is, I think we need to bear in mind, are we ready? I don't think so, in terms of, and I suppose I'm saying that kind of politely, we're not ready for it. But I've always said from the outset that accessibility, in particular digital accessibility, is a journey. So I would very much see the implementation of the European Accessibility Act as saying, okay, here's the stick now. You have to start working on your digital accessibility. You have to make sure that your website, your mobile app, your product is usable by, not just people with disabilities, but I would say everyone. 25% of people require some level of support using technology. So I think the European Accessibility Act is a good way to say this is important. Europe believes in that equality and that inclusion, and this is the starting point. So there's plenty of time to get ready, even though we're in the final kind of month piece. But as we all know, technology and the digital world evolves so quickly. It's important to continually invest in technology to meet the latest standards.
I suppose as you raised the issue there, where we have 25% of people requiring some sort of assistance, that, we're not talking about people that, for want of an easier term, would have a traditional disability, but for people that are perhaps getting older, that have been left behind by the digital divide. So this is something that comes under that umbrella as well, does it?
Yeah. Do you know what? I grew up with very limited vision. I still have very limited vision. And, I've always, because I was working in the tech sector, I've always seen technology as a huge enabler for me personally. And, it really can be a way to kind of break down barriers. But I think as I've kind of grown in my career, I originally thought it was just something that people with, sight loss need. If you've got a specific type of sight loss, you can overcome anything using technology. But the more and more people I talk to across varying types of disabilities, they all say the same thing. Technology can be a huge enabler. And then I started to think about this a little bit more. It's actually broader than that. Technology is a huge enabler to everyone. It's to everyone of all different types of abilities, and I think the European Accessibility Act, even though, accessibility is really about accommodation and people think about people with disabilities, I think it's far broader than that. It really, really is. It's about making technology work for everyone. And it's trying to set a standard or maybe a benchmark, let's say, or a compliance level, to say, if you hit this standard, by hitting various digital accessibility standards, you're making your technology work for everyone. But I think what's really important to focus on is that I don't think there's a burden on Irish companies to become digitally accessible. I think that's the wrong approach to this. If we've kind of flipped that on its head, right? So we know that 25% of people need support using technology. But those 25% of people have money to spend. So if you're a commercial, if you're working in e-commerce at the moment, or you're selling your services online, increasing your available audience by 25% is an absolute no-brainer. Like I've never met a CFO, a CEO, a head of e-commerce wouldn't bite your hand off for a percentage increase, let alone a 25% potential increase in acquisition. So I think we need to kind of flip the messaging of this a little bit on the head and say, by working with, the European Accessibility Act and making yourself compliant, you're potentially opening your acquisition, your conversions, and increasing them by 25%. And who wouldn't invest that in? Companies these days investigate the color of a single button to try and increase conversions. How about we set a level of standard so everyone can use it, and we can potentially increase it by 25%. So I think that's the way I personally look at it.
And, when we look at levels of compliance with any sort of legislation that's come in, it does become a huge selling point in and of itself. It manages to give a company the appearance of being, on the cutting edge, to really caring about their reputation as well as their potential growth. Have you seen that kind of attitude entering business as well?
Oh, without a doubt, obviously with my own company, Nexus Inclusion, like we offer tools to support people on this journey. But what we tend to find is what resonates with people is kind of 3 or 4 things, and it's one of many of them. There is, of course, the European Accessibility Act, so there's a compliance issue. So you see larger organizations tend to say, well, we've got a dedicated compliance team, we'll get people working on that, and that's great, and that's how it should be. But ultimately, there's a commercial reality, as we spoke about earlier, but more and more companies have diversity, particularly in Europe, have diversity, equity, inclusion as part of their leadership values, or part of their hiring strategies and how they engage with their staff. And it's something they want to say that we are equally inclusive to everyone, because, there's diversity brings success, and what I think ultimately, this comes down to by looking whether you're looking at it from a diversity, equity, inclusion approach, whether you're looking at it from a commercial approach or a compliance approach. It's just the right bloody thing to do. Like, make your tools available to everyone. Make your allow people to have financial independence, allow people to research their own education online. All of this, it just makes sense, and it's the right thing to do by any moral standard, is my view.
And the earlier example you gave of the Americans with Disabilities Act, I think it's sort of very much been a groundbreaking piece of legislation in that every government website had to be accessible to everybody, and I thought that was quite it was a new perspective given to technology, and something that was quite heartening to see. So let's talk a little bit about Nexus AI, which is your startup. So what do you bring to the table when it comes to the DEI journey?
So we've taken a kind of a unique approach to this. So there's many accessibility companies out there, both in Ireland and internationally, and what I found the most frustrating is that most of the companies are very good at saying you need to be accessible, you need to be accessible, you need to be accessible. The trouble is, not a lot of companies really tell you how to be that way, or they're very good at pointing out what the issue is, but what's the solution, And it becomes, in my view, a little bit too finger pointy. So, what is the game changer? What is the technology change that really made me focus on wanting to do this, and take a risk as a founder? And I really think it's generative AI. And so many times, in the technology sector, everyone's scrambling to find an idea for how can I use generative AI? I know it's going to be the next big thing. It is the big thing at the moment, or how do I leverage that in a commercial way? What's actually slightly different in the technology sector for inclusion is because generative AI brings context. It's the one thing it does beautifully well, is that it looks at a large data set, determines what the probability of the next thing is, and then, but for people who maybe can't use technology, they have a different contextual view on that, so they might want to read something at a different level. Maybe they're more of a visual person than an auditory person. Maybe they're neurodiverse, or, so there's so many different spectrums. But if you look at all of the large language models that are out there now, or image models or video models, you can quite easily bring them together. So what Nexus Inclusion is doing is that we're looking at the entire product development cycle. So whether you build applications, whether you build websites, whether whatever your product development lifecycle is, or whatever your product is, we're giving you the tools right from development all the way through to in production and monitoring. And we looked at each specific user. So whether you're a developer, a designer, whether you're a program manager, product owner, we wanted you to be able to use our system and get the tools you want. And then we've embedded kind of that approach to generative AI from the ground up to say, okay, we found an issue here, whether it's in your design or your code or whatever. And we also have worked with people with disabilities, such as myself and broader people, and said, here's how you not only meet the standard and be compliant, because obviously there's compliance hook for a lot of people, but here's how you create a good user experience for everyone. So whether it's a piece of text, you can do an analysis on it and say, this is the reading level it's at now, but maybe you should look at this level of complexity to reach a broader audience. Or if you've got people who possibly, have a different social or economic background, here's a different way you can approach that. So, and then what we do is we've built a full product management side of it. So you can actually manage your product development and inclusion side by side. And there's a big term in the accessibility space about, moving accessibility to the left. So you started at the start of your product development. But what we've actually done is we've embedded that thinking through every single stage of product development. And we're building the tools to do that, heavily focused on the AI piece to give that context, that solution, So like I'd said earlier, finding the issue is easy. Solving it is hard. And we spent all our efforts working on the solution as opposed to finding the problem.
That idea of embedding accessibility into the product, we very often hear the example of security where people say, look, we're trying to embed security into the problem. But in real terms, what happens is that the product gets developed and security is left way down the line until it becomes a problem. Is this something you have come across where people are developing solutions and then leaving security to the last end in the same way that they're leaving accessibility to the last part?
Yeah, 100%. And I've seen that over and over again, particularly in people that have been reaching out to us lately, is that you've got a mixture of people that they now have a product, it's live, they're selling online, they know they're impacted by the European Accessibility Act, and it's almost like that help moment, like how do I retrofit that? Because obviously, if you were to start building a product again, you embedded security or inclusion or X into your product development, that's the cheapest way to do it, because you don't have to do any retrofit or any you don't have to fix any technical debt. But what I would say to people listening today is that if you're listening to this going, well, we're live now and we're not going to have the resources to go ahead and retrofit, inclusion, it is companies like Nexus Inclusion that say, this is achievable. We'll give you what you need to do. You can build it into your product roadmap. And as every technology or every technology business out there creates technical debt. And this is just one of those things that you need to adhere to, And I remember before getting a security audit in a previous company, and you get a long, long list of all the things that you've done wrong. And I remember thinking at the time, going, what do I do with this? Like, oh my God, I didn't realize we were so bad. And we've tried to embed security all across every platform. And I think sometimes that can feel the same from an accessibility standpoint. You're handed this big list of things that are wrong, and no one wants to get a report like that. So we've really taken the approach at Nexus Inclusion to say, you know what, here is the problem. Here's how you can fix a lot of them together. Here's how you can make it compliant. Here's how you can make it inclusive. And we've really focused on the user journey, which I think is critical.
So when it comes then to actually, implementing a solution or retrofitting, if required, how long a process is this? I mean, do you have to sit down and go, okay, this is my life for the next 6 months, or is it something much simpler?
No, not at all. I think it's certainly something that I would say, I wouldn't maybe use the term simple, but I think there is effort required. It's not you're not ramping up a team of developers just to fix an issue, but it also comes down to the size of the organization. Like if you're purely a web business, that there's many tools like Nexus Inclusion provide that can support you on that journey, make sure you're there. And I think another thing that just to point out is that one of the things that we do and we've embedded into our solution is we'll monitor your website then ongoing. So if you do decide to, and I obviously encourage everyone to invest in a specific project to bring your technology up to a compliance level, we'll monitor it for you then over, ongoing. So if you're ever, if a new change is pushed live, we can alert you to make sure that's there. But it kind of, it's one of those things like, so obviously a large financial institution or a large, larger enterprise that has multiple digital products, that is going to take some kind of effort, to put in. And, but most of those companies have compliance teams that will manage that end to end. But for your smaller SMEs, that are out there, I think it's a very manageable and attainable thing to do. And certainly working with companies like Nexus Inclusion, we've tried to simplify that as much as possible. So you don't get a huge report, don't know what to do with it. And one of the things that we've looked at quite heavily is that, not every company has a team of developers. Possibly they've outsourced their web development, or, we've broken it down into very manageable chunks. So what's content related? What's related to an image that's there? What's related to, the structural pieces? Have you thought about it this way? So a lot of this can be done by the end user themselves without actually needing to go back to your development company, so, and then we guide you along the process. So we will say things like, if you fix these 3 things, or if you look specifically at these 3 things, your compliance level will jump quite a bit, so it's not about just having this unprioritized list. It's about having a very clear, actionable plan to get get your website or your app or whatever compliant and accessible and inclusive.
And that was Niall Kitson with Kyron O'Mahony of Nexus Inclusion. To find out more, you can see their website at nexusinclusion.com, and we'll include that in the show notes for you.
This is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
That's about it for our podcast this week. A couple more stories we didn't have time to chat about in the podcast, but are online for you, including what, Niall?
Yeah, we've got a piece on how AI can be used to improve the speed of cancer diagnosis and reduce the cost of treatment. Ingram Micro gets hit with a ransomware attack, and a project working on better ways to forecast flooding.
You'll find all of those stories and more online at techcentral.ie. And do sign up for our daily newsletter as well, so you get all the tech stories relevant to Ireland as well. We're back again next Friday with a brand new show online and with RTE Radio 1 Extra. In the meantime, please do share our podcast with a friend. If they're into tech and gadgets and what's going on here in Ireland, just ask them to look up Tech Radio Ireland on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and you get us top search. Until then, from myself, Dusty Rhodes, and from Niall Kitson, thanks very much for listening. Have a great weekend.
Remember, you can get the latest Irish tech news with hourly updates, daily newsletters, and more at our website, techcentral.ie. Share the knowledge and invite a friend to listen. Search Apple, Spotify, or YouTube for Tech Radio Ireland, or listen with RTE Radio 1 Extra. Tech Radio is produced by dustpod.io for techcentral.ie. From me, Artemis, live long and prosper.